So we all know that we have to submit to Christ, but there's a lot of people who think and say that we need to submit to our pastor as well. But that comes with some questions. What if we think the pastor's wrong? What if we have biblical evidence to say the pastor is wrong? What if we think that the pastor is not in alignment with Christ? So I want to talk about this concept that I have of submitting to Christ and yielding to man. And when I say that, I want you to think about road signs, the stop sign, the yield sign. So when you come to a stop sign, what do? You stop. And that's how we treat submitting to Christ. We submit to Christ alone, meaning when he says something, we stop and we do it. However, when you come to a yield sign, you don't stop. You just slow down, you check to make sure there's no cars coming the other ways, and then you continue going. That's the way we deal with any man, any person, any human being who's trying to tell us something about the Bible. Now, some of you might argue, well, Paul says in Romans 13 that we must submit to governing authorities. Well, that comes with some questions too, I believe. Like, first off, what does it mean by governing authorities? Does that mean the government? Does that mean the pastor or the church government of the elders and the deacons and the pastors, the shepherds? Because the Greek word that he uses has a lot of different meanings, one of which being superior, basically saying anyone who has a higher authority than you, submit to them. But what does that mean? So I'll read verses 1 and 2. I have them on my computer screen behind my phone, which I'm recording with. Everyone is to obey the governing authorities, for there is no authority that is not from God, and the existing authorities have been placed where they are by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities is resisting what God has instituted, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. That's verse 1 and 2. So Paul gives no provision for when we are allowed to rebel. However, all throughout my life growing up, whenever I was read this passage, when it was taught to me, whether in youth group or a Sunday morning sermon, there is always an asterisk. When can we righteously rebel against governing authorities? And of course, the first and probably only scripture that's brought up is the book of Daniel. We see 4 characters: Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, better known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and then Daniel himself. All 4 of them flat out broke the law because it went against their law. The first 3 were told to bow to a statue. That's idolatry. They said, no, we're not doing that. We submit to God. And because they would not submit and bow to the golden statue, they were thrown in the fiery furnace. Daniel was given a proclamation from the king to stop praying. He continued praying, and he was thrown in the lion's den. So all 4 of them resisted, rebelled, flat out broke the law. They rebelled against the governing authorities. Yet we look at them as examples to follow rather than to avoid. They go against Romans 13 because Paul again gives no provision in this section of this is when you are allowed to rebel against authority. We throw that asterisk in there. We say obey authority unless, but God saved all 4 of those people. He was with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the fiery furnace. He sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions while Daniel was in there. So why did God save those 4 people if they were supposed to submit to governing authorities? This leads me to 1 John chapter 4. I'm going to read verse 1 for you. Dear friends, don't trust every spirit. On the contrary, test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. So let me stop for a second and explain prophets and false prophets. In Judaism, prophecy wasn't just seeing the future. It was about leading people to God. So a false prophet is anyone who is not leading someone to God. whether because they're preaching a false gospel, whether they are seeking their own glory and not really leading people to God, just trying to make a name for themselves, whatever it is. A false prophet isn't just someone who sees the future incorrectly or makes incorrect predictions of what's going to happen in the future. A false prophet is anyone who teaches or tries to influence or tries to lead someone not towards God. The Jews considered the book of Judges to be a book of prophecy because the judges, each one of them, tried to lead the people back to God. It's not that they all heard from God, they all spoke to God personally, and they all had visions of the future. It's that they all tried to lead people back to God. So a prophet isn't just someone who hears and speaks to God on a personal level, because that would make us all prophets, because when the veil was torn in the temple, we were all given access to speak to God directly, and God can speak to us directly. That would mean we're all prophets. But what a prophet is someone who tries to lead someone else to God. But because false prophets exist, that means that not every prophet is a true prophet. Meaning there are going to be some leaders who are not true and genuine in their faith, and they are actually trying to, maybe not necessarily trying to lead people away, but they are leading people away. I've heard the question asked a lot, why are there so many denominations of Christianity? I think it's precisely because of this, that people come in with a either slightly incorrect gospel or flat out incorrect gospel, and others just accept it because we are told to submit to our pastors when that's not what the Bible itself says. John says, test the spirits, because not every prophet is of God. Not every pastor, therefore, is of God. Take a look at the kings throughout 1st and 2nd Kings. Some of them, it explicitly says, they did not follow God. Some of them, it explicitly says, they followed God. If we were supposed to blindly submit to every prophet, every pastor, every preacher, every teacher, then we would not have Christianity the way it is today. It would be an amalgamation of every denomination, as well as like Jehovah Witness and Mormon and Catholic, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox. We wouldn't have all these separate religions and denominations. We would have one big clump of whatever it would be called. If we were to inherently accept every person who came and said, hey, I have a message from God, that would mean that we would all have listened to Joseph Smith. We would have all listened to all these different people who came at all these different times, beginning from Jesus's ascension to heaven, who said, I have a message from God, I have a gospel from Jesus, who said something that completely contradicted the Bible. And that is why John says, test the spirits, because not everything submits to God. Not all messages are from God. Not every word is from the Word. So when I say submitting to Christ and yielding to man, what does that look like practically? Practically, submitting to Christ means obeying his commands and following him. So what does yielding to man look like? When someone tries to rebuke you, take a look at what you were doing. Were you right or were you wrong? Were you biblically sound in what you were doing, or were you off? Now, from the person, were they right to come and rebuke you? Were they right in trying to correct you? Or were they wrong? Were they out of line? Are they wrong in what they're even trying to correct you on? And it also looks like accepting instruction if the instruction itself is biblical. Because again, there are false prophets out in the world. They are leading people, whether intentionally or not, away from Christ. Therefore, we can't just take every pastor, every preacher, every teacher at their word. We always have to double check what they are saying is biblically accurate. Because there are going to be a lot of preachers, a lot of teachers who say something that sounds good, but is not biblically sound. Just because something sounds good doesn't mean it is sound. So in submitting to Christ alone, that means we submit to Christ. We do not submit to people. We do not just stop and say, okay, my pastor said this, I'm accepting it and immediately adding it into my life. That's what we do with Christ, not with man. With man, we yield. We but we slow down. We check to make sure everything's okay, and then we keep going.